Welcome back to Nomad Nation Shop Talk, everyone. I'm Dave, owner of Off Road Nomads. With me is Paul, our shop manager. Today we're going to talk about why you dumb need to upgrade your axles before you go kick the out of your Jeeps. What are we going to be talking about today, Paul?
We're going to be talking about axle shafts, specifically these out of a Dana 44 on a JK.
All right, so why don't we start talking a little bit about the components of an axle shaft?
So on the end of the axle shaft, we have looks like a gear. It's called a towing ring. That's for the ABS. That's what picks up the wheel speed for your ABS. Mm-hmm. And then where the axle bolts to is actually called the retaining plate. And that's what holds the axle in the housing.
Right, and then behind the retaining plate sits the race and the bearing.
And then we have the seal, the race, and the bearing.
Okay, so these are stock
Yes.
axle shafts. So we just pulled these out.
Out of a Sport, which is a 30 spline axle.
Yep, 30 spline axle. So the numbers, why don't we talk a little bit about spline? What do we mean by number of splines?
If you can see it on the end of the shaft there, it has 30 ridges and valleys around the end of it. That's what makes up the splines.
Yep, so when the axle is installed inside the axle shaft is installed inside the axle tube, those mesh with carrier, which turns the gears, which makes your wheels go around. There are three different spline options for a Dana 44 axle. You've got the 30 spline, which is in the Sport.
Yep.
You've got the 32, which is in the Rubicon, or you can upgrade to a 35 spline, like with an ARB axle.
Yeah.
So
you can upgrade in order to upgrade to a 35 spline axle, you have to upgrade the carrier.
You have to change the carrier.
So that the 35 spline axle will go in.
Yeah. So what are some of the advantages of upgrading to a higher spline count?
They are stronger.
Okay, yeah.
You have more connecting points inside the carrier to the axle, so it makes it stronger. You'll wear out the splines on the axle over time, and they will strip off. That's why a lot of people change axle sizes. That's not, or somebody that goes out and plays really hard, they're known for stripping off.
Right, yeah, so they can get stripped. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the different types of axle shafts as far as the metal. So the stock ones, they're perfectly fine for
everyday driving,
even off-roading, some even moderate, even some heavy off-roading. But what most folks do is they want to upgrade to, and we hear it all the time, that Chromoly axle, Chromoly, however you want to pronounce it.
However you pronounce it.
Well, why? What is a Chromoly axle? Well, Chromoly is actually an alloy metal. It's a blend.
Mix-up.
It's a blended metal, and it is extremely strong. It's about 35% stronger than the stock axle shafts. So when's the best time to replace it? Well, ideally before you break your stock axles, but what happens, a lot of people are out on the trails and they break an axle, and the next thing you know, they're in here, or in this particular case, a leak developed.
These got replaced because the owner was hearing a noise while he was driving down the road.
Which is every Jeep owner out there ever. This just happened to be a distinct noise.
But this one sounded different than what he was used to. So he thought maybe it was a tire. He thought maybe it could be a brake dragging, but brought it in and we could actually feel the play in the bearing.
Right.
So the bearing was starting to separate. So that's why, instead of us just replacing the bearing and the seal, he decided to go ahead and upgrade his to a stronger axle.
And you've heard me talk about this before as far as the labor is concerned. So it was a smart decision to upgrade at that time because the amount of labor is the same. All you're paying for is the part. So the upgraded axle. So regardless of whether we just replaced the bearing, seal, and race versus replacing the whole axle, same amount of labor to get them out of there and put the new ones in. So he purchased upgraded axles, Cromley axles. I don't remember what spline they were. Do you
30.
remember? They were 30
Because
spline.
it's a
It's just
sport.
sport. That's right. And so now he has the upgraded Cromley axles, and he doesn't have to worry about paying that extra labor to have them swapped out later.
Either way, we were going to have to pull the axles completely all the way out. Then we'd have to separate these to pull everything off of them and put the new stuff on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the new ones, they came separated, so we just had to put them all back together and put them in.
Yeah.
So it really is the same amount of time.
Same amount of time. We have seen a lot of bad things happen out on the trails. You break an axle out on a trail and you can be in big trouble. So there's lots of different options for axles out. I mean, lots of brands, lots of different. So what are we paying for here? I mean, besides the upgrade,
do your research.
And that's
all it is.
You pay for a brand name, or you pay for what it boils down to is warranty. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Some of your higher end, because there's all kinds of different manufacturers. There's 10 of them that I can think of right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
The process for manufacturing a Cromley axle is the same. I mean, it's a process out of that blended metal. So some of the manufacturers, some of the higher end manufacturers have higher quality QC quality standards. They have different machining. Our advice here is don't cheap out on upgrading your axles. You're wasting your time and money. If you are unsure, you can call us or email us at shoptalk@offroadnomads.net. Call a local shop wherever you're at. Just ask some questions. There are many different options.
Oh yeah. It's never ending. It's a Jeep.
Yeah.
There's never ending.
Yep.
Suppliers.
But ordering axle shafts and off-brand, you're just wasting your money.
You get what you pay for.
You do. In this big case, you absolutely get what you pay for. So, what are some of the more common failure points?
What I look for is the bearing. That's the first thing I check on any of them. And then that's just as simple as having it up in the air, either on a jack stand or here we have them up on the lift, and checking the tire, moving the tire, make sure there's no play in it. After that, you have to kind of pull things apart to know for sure if you've got going to have a problem with the spline on the shaft or anything like that.
Right. And that's where a lot of people are misled or misunderstood when you start having issues with your shafts, and you may not know because you can't see it. It's not like a ball joint or something where you can actually, it doesn't take a whole lot to check that. You can visually see them without having to do much more than remove the wheel, if that. So axle shafts, especially front axle shaft problems, damage, that's kind of an underlying cause of death wobble. One that's very much overlooked. Everybody always, we're not gonna fly down that rabbit hole. But
that's too deep.
Yeah, it is. Right now. It is. Death. But that is actually, we have found issues with axle shafts that were the actual cause of these poor customers taking their Jeeps wherever, and they have the ball joints replaced, they have the hubs replaced, they have steering stabilizer replaced, they have their shocks replaced, they have an alignment, and it's really not necessary because somebody didn't think to check
the U-joint in the front axle shaft.
U-joint in the front axle shaft. We see that quite a bit. One of the things that we check when we're checking for death wobble, because it's more common than people think.
Yeah, it truly is. It is one of the most overlooked things that is possible to have on a Jeep.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to be clear too, upgrading your axle doesn't make you completely indestructible.
No.
I mean, but it increases your likelihood of not breaking something by about 35%.
Yeah.
It's kind of like those, if you remember from a previous episode when I talked about the life of a Jeep, where every mile is like dog years. For every mile you off-road, it's like putting 7 miles on your Jeep. So doing upgrades like this can change that ratio. So with upgraded axles, axle trusses, axle shafts, all that, re-gearing, upgrading your gears, that all adds to the lifespan of your Jeep as well. So now we're talking maybe, 1 mile for every 5 just for doing that. I mean, that's just just a guess, but so doing things like this can not only increase your enjoyment of off-roading because you worry a little bit less, but it will help the longevity, and it might increase your resale value.
Very true.
Not really. Nothing increases the resale value of these things. The public increase, the demand increases it, but upgrades like this are definitely something to seriously consider when you're buying, whether it's new or used.
Yeah, if you have the need to replace the bearings.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have to have something done on it.
It doesn't even have to be that the bearing's going bad. It could be that the seal is wore out and it's starting to leak now.
Yeah, the seal, same amount of work.
The same amount of work.
For an $8 seal, we have to do the same amount of labor.
Spend a little bit extra money up front to get the better axle shaft, but it's still the same amount
And
of work.
axle shafts range in price from, the good ones. I don't know what I would say, anywhere from $400 to $1,000 for a pair are typically that's such a wide range, but I would say a good average cost of a good set of chromoly axles is about $600.
Yeah.
So install labor time is about what it'd take you to do this job, about 2 hours, maybe 3.
Yeah.
So you can do this at home. However, without having a press, without having the right tools, and like Paul mentioned earlier, having a lift where you can work at eye level makes it so much easier. So sometimes it's just worth it to pay a couple of nitwits like us to do it for you, and then you don't have to worry about it. You drop it off a little bit later, done, and you don't have to worry about it. So, but when you're shopping for axle shafts, make sure you're doing your homework. Look, check out their warranty, read the reviews, call a local shop, email us again, shoptalk@offroadnomads.net. We will help you. Even if you're not in our area, if you're across the country, if you're in Germany, we got a viewer, we've got some viewers in Germany. Email us, call us. We'll figure out a way to talk to you.
We might not get business from you, but we'll still help you.
I mean, why not? So why don't we talk to everybody about what kind of preventative maintenance we can do for these things to help keep the bearings from going bad prematurely, or the seals from blowing out? What causes that?
What causes the seals to blow out is just overall use of the Jeep. I mean, because it's just a seal that sits in one place and the axle shaft moves on the inside of it.
Yep.
So over time, it's going to wear out.
Yep.
But the other thing to that is knowing and making sure that you're changing the differential
That's kind of what
fluid.
I was getting at. Changing your diff fluid on a regular basis. Yep.
If you are somebody that goes out and wheels hard all the time.
1 mile for every 7. So.
Well, and sometimes you might want to go even more than that, depending on how hard you go.
Yeah. I would say, what would you recommend? I mean, I know what the manufacturers recommend, but we all know that Jeep owners, manufacturer recommendations don't mean anything. So, I mean, I say 30,000 miles. I say even if you wheel hard, whether you're a weekend warrior, you go once a month or whatever, every 30 grand, have your diff service done. It's not an expensive
No, it's
thing.
not.
And it takes less than an hour to do a day.
Well,
whether you do it yourself or you bring it to a shop.
Even if you think that 30,000 miles is too soon, at least every time you're done out on the trail and you get back home, pull the plug. Yeah. Pull the inspection plug.
Well, and
look, at least get a look at the fluid and see if it's starting to brown.
Yeah. And that's a good point.
If it's starting to brown, then you're better off to go ahead and change it.
Yeah. So, and what caused, and also if you, especially wheeling off-roading, and I'm going to just go ahead and single out our friend Gary. If you submarine your Jeep, what happens? Water gets in.
Yeah,
it can, even though it's sealed, it can get in.
Yes.
It's not airtight.
No, because every differential, every engine, every transmission, transfer case, everything has a breather on it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it didn't, it would never hold a seal in it because it'd just blow it out.
Just blow it. So when you have water gets in that vent, and then it contaminates
Then you get water in the oil. And all that does is chew up bearings.
And because of it creates rust and gets debris in there.
You will have rust in the axle tube.
Right.
Where the oil doesn't sit all the time.
Right.
That is normal to see because you do have fresh air getting in due to the breather being there.
Right. And that's a good point. And you'll have a little bit of oxidation there that you can.
And depending on how hard you are on it, it can look more like surface rust.
Yeah.
And stuff like that on the inside of the axle.
Yep. So that debris that can just wreak havoc on.
Yeah.
And so whether you've had your differentials serviced or the oil changed, and then you go out wheeling and you have a weekend of really good, especially if it's raining, muddy, and you're just plowing through everything.
If you're going through water,
check it again
check it whenever you get home.
Check it when you're done because you might have to change it again.
If it was too bad of water, you might want to check it before you go home, especially if you're driving.
Well, yeah, that's very true because and then that could be a clear indication that you have something else going on too. But so those are things that a lot of folks overlook. You don't think about that when you're.
A lot of people don't because it's not something that they see.
Nope.
It's under the Jeep. They don't ever look at it because they don't ever see it.
Yeah.
So they don't think about it.
Yeah. And on a typical Dana 30 or 35 or 44, on a typical, it's real easy to check the differential fluid if you don't have a check plug. Some of the aftermarket brands like G2 and stuff, they have a fill plug and a check plug. So the fill plug, all it is just a 3/8 ratchet. I mean, you don't even have to put a socket on it. You put a little extension on there, and that fits right into the drain plug. You just unscrew that. And what I do is I take like 6 millimeter or 5 or 4 millimeter Allen wrench, and I just stick it down in there and put it level. And if it comes back out with fluid on it, typically you're fine.
Yeah.
So usually sometimes you can see it. And when you fill them back up, you just fill it to the bottom of the plug drain, and you're full. So just remember to be careful with what kind of fluid you use. Yes. Stick with the manufacturer recommendation or your shop's recommendation for the gears that you have.
Yes.
Oftentimes when you re-gear, especially in an older Jeep like a TJ, the newer gears require a different type of gear oil, a synthetic, and if you have lockers, it requires that conditioner.
So you have to know what you have.
Yeah, you've got to know what you have. So, I mean, in an emergency, if it is a dire emergency, you can just dump, 75, 90 gear on it. But that's kind of a judgment call on that. But
I would go to somewhere where I can get the right fluid and change it out.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a matter of getting off the trail versus not, you can, like I said, it's more of a judgment call. But
it really is.
So here at the shop, we use a couple of different kinds. We use the Royal Purple full synthetic, and we also for the other styles where we do not use synthetic, we use Lucas Oil.
Yeah.
Those are two very, very good brands. Keep an extra bottle in your Jeep.
It might not hurt to keep a couple extra bottles because you never know.
Well, what does it take? It depends on what the axle is, but it's about 2 quarts. Yeah, about 2 quarts. Okay, so we've just been recently asked a question about tire size versus axle shaft. So that's one of those subjects that you're going to get answers that are
everybody
has their own thoughts and opinions. Some of them are a little out there, but so let's start with wheeling itself. So if you're very aggressive, if you're really hardcore, what size tire you have doesn't matter. You're
No.
going to break whatever you have.
Yeah.
So not really thinking about that, but so let's say somebody wanted to upgrade to a 35-inch tire. That's probably the most common.
Yeah.
I want to go 35s. What can I do to put 35s on my Jeep? So you're fine
On
stock axle shafts on 35s for light, moderate, even some pretty heavy duty off-roading.
even on mine's still got a stock axle shaft in mine, and it runs. I have 35s on it.
Yep. And
I have never had
problems.
any issues.
Yeah. So sometimes you just gotta relax. Just chill out. Just go. You know,
don't have to go spend the money on something.
Not necessarily. Yeah.
If you don't need to.
Yeah. So, but we like it when you do. I mean, don't get me wrong. We'll take.
But you don't have to run that.
No, you don't. 35-inch tire is kind of the sweet spot for the Jeep. I mean, 33s are there. With 33s, you don't even have to do much of anything to throw a set of 33s on and take off. Skid plates, always skid plates first, no matter what. I'm going to say that religiously. But 35s, that's, I don't want to say the cutoff, but you start talking about 37s, bigger tire, heavier tire, more rotations. If you're running 37s, odds are you're going to abuse them a little bit more.
You're going to start tearing up bearings.
And now you're going to start tearing up bearings. So that's where the Cromley axle shafts, the upgraded spline counts, the higher spline counts.
You get into a very much bigger tire, you want to start looking into a 32 or a 35 spline axle.
That's right. Stronger, more reliable, and you also want to think about, make sure you're not buying cheap bearings either.
Yeah.
Gosh dang, I can't tell you how many times we see this where people will come in and say, I want to do all this work, and then when we do a motor swap, we have people spend thousands of dollars to have us put new motors in, or they want to do an LS swap, and then it's like, oh, well, I want to do a new set of tires, and I want to do, something, but they want the cheapest possible solution. Same thing with the components of your axle shaft. Typically, when you buy a set of axle shafts, they will come. They come with everything, with the bearing, everything that you need. So just be mindful when you're shopping for them, or when you're doing your research.
Yeah, whenever you do your research, you want to make sure that it's going to have good parts with it.
Yeah. So coming back to 37-inch tires, we highly recommend that you upgrade your axles if it is more than a daily driver.
Yes.
If it's more than, everybody knows, if it's a pavement princess or a mall crawler, whatever you want to call it. If you go off-roading, that's one of the things that you need to consider.
It's not going to take too long on a 37 to start. And that's what happened here.
Yeah.
It didn't take very long on a 37 to start tearing up the bearings on these axles.
Yeah. So even daily driving is going to put a strain on it. And what will also help with that is upgrading to heavy duty ball joints. They work together. All that stuff encompasses each other. And so if you have heavy duty ball joints in, it puts less strain on the hub, which puts less strain on the axle, which puts less strain on the carrier, which puts less strain on your pinion gear, which puts less strain on your ring gear, which puts less strain on your wallet. Remember that. So you can, and oftentimes it's cheaper to fix it before it's broken. So
generally,
yeah. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today, everyone. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And please, for the love of God, get me to 1,000 subscribers so I can give away that damn impact gun, would you? Paul, let's get back to work. We want to get to 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible, and we need your help. If you're one of those first 1,000 subscribers, you will automatically be entered to win the Milwaukee 18-volt cordless impact gun. Go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss one of our videos. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you in the next video.